He got away from Mom one day. Before she knew he was gone, he had went down to the railroad tracks about 3 blocks and was sitting in the middle of the tracks when Hod Taylor saw him playing in the tracks. Hod Taylor ran and got him off the track just minutes before a fast passenger train came through Minden. Hod Taylor was the railroad section foreman. His shop was about a block down the track from where Merle was. During my teen years, I would go out to work in the summertime when school was out at Hugger and Ivan Nelson's and others like Art Ruth and Bill Ruth and Walt Felzine, who were all relatives of the Nelson family. I worked very hard on these farms, but I guess it was good for me as it helped me to grow up and helped me keep me out of trouble during the summer. After the Standard Oil Company got their first truck on Saturdays, when I was not in school, I would go with the driver to make deliveries to the farmers, and he would let me drive the truck. I got to be got so I could handle the truck pretty well. I remember one Halloween, us kids in the neighborhood went around turning over the usual thing, outhouses. People didn't have bathrooms, so they had their little outhouse out in the back. And one of them had someone in it. Boy, did they put up a fuss, because the door was next to the ground and he couldn't get out. Then we took a big cement mixer, which was mounted on iron wheels, but we managed to get it up on the high school steps and porch next to the front door of the school, so that the door to the school couldn't be opened until it was moved away. The school principal tried to find out who did it, but I don't think he ever did find out. I want to mention the playground us kids played on. It was a big vacant lot. And years after we left Minden in 1924, a man by the name of Harold Wharf, quite prominent figure in Minden, built what is now known as Pioneer Village on these lots. Also, it covered the area that we lived. When Dad first worked for the Standard Oil Company, Pioneer Village has a lot of old buildings that was moved in there. Old cars, machinery, and all things in general. Also, the old Standard Oil tank wagon that Dad had to deliver oil in around Minden is also in Pioneer Village. There's a lot more I could say about Minden while we lived there, but I feel I must move along. In early spring of 1924, Dad and Mom decided we would move to Pocatello, Idaho. So Dad left ahead of the family so he could get started to work at the Union Pacific Railroad. The family, my mother Grace, myself Raymond, my brothers Merrill and Walter, and oh yes, I failed to mention. We have a baby sister born in Minden, Ruth Rogine. We all left Minden the first part of June 1924 in a 1921 Model T Ford touring car. After several days of rough dirt and gravel roads and several flat tires, we arrived in Pocatello, Idaho. We stayed with Uncle Walt and Aunt Myrtle for a few days until Mom and Dad could find a place for the family to live. They found a place on Wayne Avenue with one house in between us and the Coffin family. This family is going to be an important part of our lives, or at least my life. Well, here we are in Pocatello, where a lot of Mormons live. Well, I'm not going to have anything to do with them, so I thought. I started to work for the Union Pacific Railroad in the shop in June, where Dad was working. Uncle Walt was boiler foreman. Dad worked as a boilermaker helper. I was a laborer. Then a couple of months later, I got a job as a boilermaker helper and had to work the graveyard shift, 12 midnight till 8 a.m. It was hot summer, and I tried sleeping out in the yard on the lawn. And I got to noticing a young girl about my age and thought I would like to know her better. She was from the Coffin family that I mentioned before, but I could never get the courage to ask her to go with me. Well, time is marching on. Aunt Bertha and Uncle Bill Shiflett and Uncle Harley and Aunt Mary Monroe and their families moved to Pocatello, adding to our family gatherings and outings, along with Uncle Walter and Aunt Myrtle, Monroe's family. Aunt Bertha and Uncle Harley and Uncle Walter are my mother's sisters and brothers. 1924, along in the summer after I had gone to work at the railroad shops, the railroad had an excursion to Lagoon, Utah, between Ogden and Salt Lake City. This was to be an outing for railroad employees and families. Well, about half of Pocatello got on the train and went along. The train didn't charge any fare as it was supposed to be employees only. While we were at Lagoon, I was standing in front of the roller coaster, the big thrill ride. Estella Coffin came by, the girl that I mentioned that lived in the house, the second house from us. I got nerve enough to ask her to go for a ride on the roller coaster. After that, it became easy to talk to her and ask her to go places with me. Or I would go with her. At least she got me started going to the LDS church, the Mormons, the one I was not going to have anything to do with. We would go to Lava Hot Springs a lot, but she would never go any place like that on Sunday. So I got to be a pretty regular attendant at the Mormon church, till a lot of people thought I was a member. So one Sunday, someone asked me to help pass the sacrament. Not knowing any better, I did. But after the meeting, Bishop Lawrence D. Clark came to me and told me that I would have to wait until I was baptized and ordained to an Aaronic priesthood before I could pass the sacrament. After I became a Boilermaker helper in the railroad shops, the Boilermaker I was working with, his name was George Cooter. He would talk to me about the church and bear his testimony. Bear his testimony to me and tell me what I wasn't supposed to do this, blubber like this, but it can't help it. And tell me what a wonderful girl Estella was, and what good talks she gave in church. Well, with Brother Cooter and Estella's encouragement in leading me into believing in the church and getting the desire to be baptized. So I was baptized the 7th of November 1926 by Raymond Hale. Estella and I saw quite a bit of each other from then on. I guess it was what you call love at first sight, but we were still too young to marry. I had not been in the church very long and had not advanced in the priesthood far enough. I was living with my Aunt Bertha and Uncle Bill Shiflett, just a block or two north of the Coffin family. My folks had moved up to Idaho Falls on a farm. Uncle Harley had built the house they, Aunt Bertha and Uncle Bill, were living in. He built it all of used lumber, and I guess the lumber was just loaded with bed bugs. And we would have to fight bed bugs every night before we could go to bed. Each morning Aunt Bertha would ask me, "How many did you kill the night before?" We had some kind of a contest going to see who could kill the most. About the latter part of 1927, Aunt Bertha got sick, and she asked me if I could find some other place to stay. Well, at Stella's place, there was several people staying there. Stella's cousin, Lester Hancock, her sister and her husband, Edna and Jack Toombs, and her brother Bud, and her dad. Her mother was deceased and died in 1924. So I went down there to stay. Things worked out pretty well until everybody began moving out. But Estella's dad and her brother Bud. So I was going to have to move also. So we decided to get married. We were married in Fontella and Vern Johnson's house by Bishop Clark. Fontella is Estella's sister. We went to Salt Lake Temple 10 days later to be sealed for time and eternity. We were married the 14th of January 1928 at Vern and Fontella's home in Pocatello, Idaho. Married, solemnized in the Salt Lake Temple 24th of January, 1928. Did I say 1928 when we were married at Pond Towers? I hope I did. I forgot to mention when we decided to get married, I gave her a ring for Christmas. I had the ring wrapped in several boxes. Started with a big box, then the boxes gradually getting smaller, so as to put her off as to what was in the box. When we decided to get married, we thought we should see the bishop and talk to him about it, as I only held the office of a priest in the Aaronic priesthood. And Estella had said she would not get married unless we could get married in the temple. So Bishop Lawrence D. Clark just lived across the street, so we didn't have far to go. When we knocked on the door, it was the bishop that opened the door. The first thing he said was, "Hello, come in. I have been expecting you." We told him what our intentions was, and his counsel was for him to perform the marriage, which would give time for my name to be passed on, to be ordained an elder. Also, it would give me the right to have a pass for my wife to ride the train through Salt Lake City to the temple. Estella's sister Edna was in California at the time. Jack, Edna's husband, they had not been to the temple before either. So Edna met us in Salt Lake City, and Jack and Edna went through the temple with us, the 24th of January, 1928. All of our children were born in Pocatello. Robert first, Shirlene second, Lois third, and Barbara fourth. We were a happy family, attended our church meetings. Estella and I held church jobs in our wards and was trying to do the things the Lord wanted us to do. We had our ups and downs and struggles, from one paycheck to another, just barely making ends meet. It seemed like every fall, about Thanksgiving time, the railroad would lay me off. So I bought an old Model T Ford truck, and I would haul manure and topsoil and spread it on the hospital lawn and the doctor's home lawn to pay for our babies being born. Also, I would go up to Idaho Falls and haul sugar beets to earn a little extra money to have to go on. I want to go back to Minden, Nebraska. There are a few things I want to tell about that I missed. The pastime sport us kids would do in the winter was to go ice skating. We would go to a farm just north of town that had a pond in the pasture, build a fire on the bank, roast marshmallows, and skate on the ice. Or we would go down to the sewage disposal plant and ice skate on the pond there. I have mentioned working on the farm at the Nelsons. Well, the last couple of summers before leaving Minden, some people by the name of Jensen This one time, the Jensens had left me home to mow hay while they went to town. What they didn't tell me was that they were going to town to buy a new car. And would be gone 3 days. They had left me to mow the hay, milk 10 or 12 cows, feed the hogs and chickens, gather the eggs, fix my own meals, and after milking the cows, run all the milk through the cream separator, wash and clean the separator for the next time. The Jensens had bought the new car and took off for a 3-day trip without saying anything to me. My dad was sure mad when he heard about it. One of the things our folks did in the summertime, they would get up early on a Sunday morning and go to the sand hills about 7 to 8 miles north of town and load the back seat of the old Model T Ford with watermelons, and we would eat all the watermelons we wanted. Dad had bought us kids a Shetland pony and a fancy buggy. That was the meanest pony that ever lived. We could hardly do anything with him. So Dad put the pony out on a farm in a pasture. The people had some boys, and Dad thought they could break him or do something with him. Well, they couldn't do anything with him either. So Dad borrowed Grandpa Reams's horse and buggy. Grandpa Reams was the grandpa of the Reams kids I mentioned before. Dad had Merle and I take the horse and buggy and get the pony. Boy, did we have a time it took us all day to go out after him and back home. One year there was a lot of scarlet fever and diphtheria going around, and they would quarantine you right to your house. Well, I was sick one day and stayed home from school. A couple of days after Merle was sick, and he was really sick, so our mother called the doctor, Dr. Powell, and Merle had scarlet fever. So Merle told him, the doctor, I had it too, and I was in school. When I got home, the doctor was waiting for me, but said I was okay and put me out of the house. Well, our mother and the rest of the kids was all quarantined, and they were all very sick. But it all came out okay. The doctor came every day to look after them. Well, this left Dad and I out of the house. But it so happened Dad had bought a cabin, and it was on the back of the lot, so we stayed in that. The cabin had been an old Indian house, Indian's cabin that had died, and Dad had bought the cabin and some other things. The Indian's old bicycle. The Indian's name was Chickapoo. Well, I'm going to take you back to Pocatello. After Estella and I were married, we had 4 children. Robert C., born January the 9th, 1929. Shirlene, born November the 5th, 1931. Lois, August the 16th, 1935. Barbara, born November the 14th, 1938. All were born in Pocatello, Idaho. I had gone to work for the Union Pacific Railroad the summer of 1924, 12 years as a Boilermaker helper, 4 years as a Boilermaker apprentice. This was before any of our children were born. When I fit, this was, what am I trying to say here? And all the work. I went to work as soon as I got to Pocatello. Our children was born while I was working as Boilermaker apprentice. When I finished my apprenticeship in 1939, I was laid off. So Estella and I went down to Whittier, California, Los Angeles area. And I got a job working for Douglas Aircraft in Santa Monica, California, building fighter planes for France. And the last job was on the first B-29 that was built. Shirlene's husband, Paul, was in the Navy after it began flying. And he got one of the first rides on it from San Francisco, California to San Diego. That was after he had moved to Vallejo, after we had moved to Vallejo, California. Well, in July of 1940, we went back to Pocatello, Idaho. And I worked that summer for the Union Pacific Railroad again until about October of 1940. I had already applied for a job at Mare Island Naval Shipyard in Vallejo. So it worked out real well. The call came about the same time that I was laid off at the UP Railroad. I decided to accept the job offer at Mare Island Naval Shipyard, Vallejo, California. So I took the car and as much belongings as I could haul. And Stella and the children stayed in Pocatello, Idaho to take care of things there before following me to Vallejo. We had to live in Richmond, California for about 4 months before we could get government housing in Vallejo, Roosevelt Terrace. A man or a neighbor, Lloyd Buxton, and I were riding back and forth to work. When they opened Roosevelt Terrace, the morning that they opened it, he and I was the first to pay rent so we could move in to Roosevelt Terrace. On November the 7th, 1941, Estella and kids and I had gone to church on Sunday. We didn't have a chapel to meet in. We had to meet in an old hall. When the meeting was almost over, Barbara, then only 3 years old, was making a fuss. So I took her outside to wait for the rest of them. We got in the car and I turned on the radio. They were telling of the bombing at Pearl Harbor. Which was the start of the United States involvement in World War II with Japan. When the rest of the people came out of church and I had told them what was happening, they couldn't believe what I was telling them. After the war started, we had to live in total darkness. I mean, our windows in the house had to be fixed so no light could show through. They had black block wardens that would go around the neighborhood and check for any light they found. They would come and tell you to get it fixed and taken care of. If you drove your car at night, you could have nothing but your parking lights on. And they had to be small lights. If they were too big, you had to put tape on them. The traffic lights had to have shields on them so they could not be seen from above or sides, only from straight ahead. At work, where I was a welder, if we had a job outside where we couldn't shield the light from the welding, we had to wait till it started getting daylight before we could do anything. All over Mare Island and the city, they had blimp balloons extended on cables from the ground to protect from a surprise air attack from the air. This was so all up and down the coast. All these restrictions were in force. The Loyal California Mare Island Naval Shipyard was good to us, in that I liked my work. I had good vacation time off and sick leave time, which could be accumulated and built up. Estella, right from the start of our moving to Roosevelt Terrace, started a child nursery and cared for children in her home. She had the nursery from 1941 till 1966. She had a licensed nursery, and she was known as Auntie Kelly all around town. There were some doctors that would refer people to her. Estella hired help to help her. I believe it. I thought the camera was running out of tape, but it doesn't seem to be. Estella hired help to help her, which gave her the needed free time over the years. Estella held several church jobs: Relief Society president, primary president, visiting teaching, and at one time was in the Young Women's Mutual also. I held several jobs in the church over the years. Also Elders Quorum presidency, 70s quorum, and 70s quorum presidency. Our stake was, for a long while, was 140 miles long. So we had to travel a lot on Sunday, particularly when I was in the 70s quorum presidency. About the last job we had was we were assigned to the Benicia, California branch, about 7 miles from Vallejo. Estella and I both were assigned to Benicia. Estella in the Relief Society and Sunday school. I was in the Sunday school presidency to begin with, which is about 2 years. Then I was called to be the branch president with 2 counselors, Andy Robbins and Art Harvey. We took care of the Sunday school also. The stake presidency decided we were having a good enough attendance at Sunday school and felt that we could hold sacrament meetings in Benicia, where we were going to the ward in Vallejo for sacrament meetings. It was through our years in the Vallejo and our church jobs that Estella and I really gained a strong testimony of the gospel of Jesus Christ, as well as all of our children. gained a testimony also. Bob served a mission in the Spanish-American Mission. He served mostly in New Mexico. All of our family were married in the temple. Robert and Barbara Ann in the Logan Temple, the 6th of November, 1952. Shirley and Paul, the Salt Lake Temple, the 7th of September, 1949. Lois and Bill in the Salt Lake Temple, the 20th of March, 1956. Barbara and Wells in the Idaho Falls Temple, the 19th of June, 1956. And that is not all. All of our grandchildren thus far have married in the temple, and we're all very proud of them and hope that this continues throughout all of our posterity. I'll continue this a little later on this tape and see what happens. We had I don't know whether it's 3 dogs or 2 dogs or over the years when our kids were small. Of course, I think the most favorite was the one that we called Mittens. Mittens was one that I think Lois kind of conned me into letting her have that dog, as I remember. She got it from somewhere as a little tiny puppy. That dog was a family friend for a long while. He was always with us, and we let him in the house, and he was a house dog, even though he was quite large. And one of the things that I remember about him was that one time he had a girlfriend down the street. And I knew the neighbors didn't want him running down there, so we had a white picket fence all the way around the yard, and I closed the gate. He could jump over that picket fence just like it wasn't even there. So I devised the idea of putting about a 10-foot rope on it so to make sure that he didn't hang himself. Then I tied a cross stick across the end of it. So when he jumped over the fence, that cross stick would catch on the pickets. He never could quite figure out what was happening here. It took him a long while before he decided there wasn't any use to try to jump that fence. Then there was another time that Lois had been out to Dorothy and Dale Partridge's when they lived out in Wyoming for the summer. And when she came home, she had a whole bunch of banty chickens. She brought them back on the train with her. And she raised those chickens. We did have a chicken coop, by the way, out in the backyard. We were living on Lemon Street in Vallejo at the time. And after a few years, the old rooster, he began to get so old he had big long spurs on him. And that rooster would walk. Mittens used to nip at him and chase him around the yard, but Stella and I both scolded him for that. So he got so that he would just let the rooster chase him. That rooster would run up behind him and jab his spurs in the back of an old Mittens and let out a yelp and run around the yard. Another thing Mittens would do, we had a fig tree out in the backyard. No one in the family except me would eat them. Well, Mittens got so he was come out there where I was at, and I was eating those figs off the tree, and so I'd give him one occasionally. One day when I was out in the backyard, I noticed him jumping up into the tree and picking the figs himself to eat them. That was kind of a funny sight to see a dog picking figs. But he did. He liked figs, so he'd pick them for himself and eat them. Another thing, when we lived there on Lemon Street, this doesn't pertain to Mittens, but during the time that we were, well, it was just at the close of the war with Japan, and we had a lot of cruisers in Mare Island, and this one day I was working on topside, way up on the top of the ship. They're called the poop deck up there. And on this deck there was a great big pair of binoculars. Them things were huge. The things were as long as my arm, and they had it mounted on a tripod. So one day I was up there fooling around, and I looked through those binoculars and I pointed them over toward where we lived, there in Vallejo. And I could see Stella out in the back, and the clothesline that she had was on there was a platform there for her to stand on to put hang the clothes on the line, and then it had a pulley. And when I came home that night, I had it all in mind. I could tell her just the way she had everything lined up on that clothesline. And she couldn't figure out. I kept her guessing for a long time how I knew how she had those clothes lined up on the clothesline. But I could see her when she was hanging them up. But getting back to the dogs that we had, there was Snoopy. There was another one in there, and I can't remember what the name, and I got them mixed up with where they belong, whether it was the first or the second dog that we had. Mittens was the last one. Oh, by the way, getting back to Mittens, we were living on Hargis Street at the time, and there was some of the family from Idaho. I don't know who it was, Von Tollen, Vern, or Edna and Jack, or somebody was there visiting, and we took a run over to San Francisco this one day, and Mittens for several days had been kind of laying around not feeling well, so I put him down in the basement, and when we came home, sure enough, he had been sick, and he vomited on the floor, and he had a few accidents in that way. Well, I let him out for a little bit and brought him back in the house, and during the evening he just laid around on the living room floor, and always let him out just before we went to bed, and then let him back in later. Well, Mittens never did come back. And there's claim that that's one of an animal's trait, that when they're sick that way, a lot of times they'll run off and hide and die and never come back. We never did see Mittens anymore. We looked all over the hillsides and around Vallejo there and all over, but we never did locate him. Now for this other dog. I think it was one that Fontaine and Byrne had given us. Is that Snoopy? I think, let's see, we only had Bob and Charlene at the time. And we were getting ready to go somewhere in the car. And the kids ran out and jumped in the car, and as they did, why, the dog followed them in, or attempted to, and one of the kids slammed the door on his leg and broke it, right when we was ready to leave. Well, I happened to be right there at the time, and I grabbed Mittens up, and I told the kids to go get me some little sticks. I told them where to pick them up at. Little sticks, and I wrapped Mittens' leg up. And he ran around for a long while with 3 legs, carrying that broken leg. And one day I thought, well, I believe this is the time to take the bandage and splints off. And I took it off, and I decided maybe I better leave it on there for a little while longer. So I wrapped it all up again, and Mittens, or not Mittens, what am I talking about? I think the dog's name was Snoopy. But anyway, the dog, as we went to bed that night and we got up the next morning, the dog had that bandage chewed off his leg. He took it off himself. And I thought, well, good enough for you. You wanted it off, so you took it off, and so we'll just leave it at that. But he still favored that leg, running around on 3 legs. And finally, one day, he started hitting the ground with the 4th leg, and gradually got back onto all 4s again. Another time, it was after we had moved to Vallejo. We were living in Roosevelt Terrace. And the dog and the kids were out playing around the neighborhood there, and as day wore on toward late afternoon, why, knock came to the door, and I went to the door, and here was a security guard from the housing there, the government housing, and he had the dog in his arms, and he says, I don't know what happened. He says, the dog was down the street here, and he just keeled over and dead. We always wondered whether he was hit with a car, or whether he didn't show any signs of being hit by a car, but he possibly had a heart attack. Well, and one other time, with that same dog, we'd been up here to Idaho or Utah, and well, we've been to Idaho is where we've been, because we was going back through by the way of Twin Falls. We stopped there for as a pit stop and to gas up the car. We let had the kids take the dog down the street and run him around a little while, give him a little exercise. Well, the dog wandered off. And when we got ready to go, the dog was nowhere to be found. He was gone. We waited around a little while, thought maybe he'd come back, but he didn't. Well, I said, well, we're going to have to go. We'll just leave the dog here and get another one, or just forget him. Boy, you ought to heard all the wailing and the crying that I got as I was heading toward going out of town. The kids was really making a fuss. Well, finally I thought, well, I better turn around and give it one more try and see if we can find him. So as we drove back down the same street that we was headed out on, as we got closer into where we were at the service station, there was a dog trotting along in the middle of sniffing the street, trying to follow us. I guess if we'd have gone on home, he'd have walked that 700 miles, but that's another trait that they claim that animals has, that they can feel out their masters where they've been and can follow them. Stella and I, over the years in Vallejo, in all of our church obligations, we tried to do the best we could, and doing the jobs that we were assigned to. And along with our testimonies grew, and our children stayed close to the church, and they were attending their mutual classes they had just started seminary about the time that our kids began to marry off, so I don't know whether they had very much seminary or not, but anyway, our stake was 140 miles long. As I was in the senior member of the Assemblies Quorum, it meant that I was away from home a lot because we had quorum members that lived way up at Willits and Fort Bragg and Lakeport. And we were gone. I was gone a good deal of the time on Sunday. But I always tried to manage to be home on fast day. That was one day that I stayed at home. After we moved from Hargis Street to Roosevelt Terrace, we had bought a little place out on Lemon Street. We lived there for about 5 years, I believe. And it was during this time that Bob was called on his mission. And we had been up to Utah and Idaho for a few days, and Bob, he stayed at home. I guess he had some studying he wanted to do, and he didn't want to go with us. And when we got home, But the first thing that Bob told us, he says, well, I had a talk with the bishop today. And I said, oh, you did? I says, what was it about? He wants to call me on a mission. I says, well, what did you tell him? I said, did you tell him that you would go? And he readily agreed that he had. Dick Lowry was the bishop at the time. He was, by the way, he was the husband of Elder Lowry, Elder Cooter, who was George Cooter that I spoke of before, and that I worked with at the railroad. So we lived just a block or two from them, and to finalize to get the papers made out for Bob's mission, why Bishop Lowry came over one day and we discussed the things that need to be talked about. And as he went to leave, he was going down off of the steps, and I told him goodbye, but I says, goodbye, Dick. And then I caught myself, and I says, oh, I mean Bishop. He says, I heard you, and then the bishop said, I heard you the first time. You can call me Dick anytime you want to. He says, I think I know you well enough that that you can call me Dick any time you want to. Well, while I'm talking about Dick Lowry, just this past year, in 1986, I've forgotten what month it was, the Lowrys have a daughter that lived here in Salt Lake, Lou Dean. And since there were so many of the Vallejo ward that were living in Utah, most of them had gone up to, a good part of them had gone up to Logan to live. And there was the Hackings that lived out in Tooele and scattered around. They decided that they'd have their 50th anniversary at the Lion House here in Salt Lake. This was just this past year in 1986. And Barbara and Charlene went with me down there, and as we was signing the guest book, why, after we got through, they had a reception line to go around and greet Dick and Elda. And finally, Dick decided that that was too slow. He wanted to speed things up, so he stood to his feet just about the time that we had finished signing the book. And his first words were, says, oh my goodness, there's Ray Kelly and his two daughters. And that was a greeting that we got from them. We went to the 50th anniversary. They've had quite a few of the Vallejo people's anniversaries here in Salt Lake. The Hackings had theirs, and there's been quite a number of them. But anyway, just about run out of something to say again. I might talk about my folks a little bit. we used to visit back and forth, drive from Vallejo clear down to Los Angeles or the Montebello area, East Los Angeles, on weekends to visit them. And Dad, he got sick, and he was sick for quite a long while, and we made several trips down. And when he passed away, why, we went down to the funeral. In 1966 it was, early part of 1966 it was. And my mother, she had a stroke, and Walt was trying to work, and there was no one there to take care of my mom. So I'd go down and I'd stay there several days and stay with her during the day. And she'd be rational one minute and off on a tangent the next. And it got to the point where there wasn't anyone there that could take care of her. Walt kept hiring somebody to come there and stay with her during the time when he was at work, but none of them seemed to work out. So Frances decided that she would take Mom in her home. And she had some little kids at the time, and Mom was quite a problem to her. Mom got up one night during the night, and Frances got up to see what she was doing. And Mom had taken the pillows off the couch and took them in and stuck them in the oven and turned the oven on. And Frances says, "What are you doing, Grandma?" And she says, "Oh, I'm baking some pies." Frances opened up the oven. It hadn't been in there long enough that they'd caught fire yet. It might have been singed a little bit, but she caught her just in time. And one night, Mom got away from them again, and she went down the street to some neighbors had a boat out in the driveway. And how she ever did, I don't know. No one ever knew how she climbed up into that boat. And she was having a great time in that boat, yelling and hollering. It was in the wee hours of the morning, causing commotion in the neighborhood. So Walt called for me again to come down and see what we could do with Mom's situation. So I went down, and we discussed the matter as to what we should do. And in the meantime, Walt had been around to some of the rest homes and try to find a place for her to stay. They found one that seemed to be a decent enough place that we felt like that we could leave her. And so we decided that was the thing to do. So we took Mom over there and admitted her to the rest home. Well, the attendants or the administrator took Mom into the living quarters where they all gathered and sat her down in a chair, and we told Mom to stay there. And she would mind in those circumstances when we'd ask her to. The administrator said, "We'll take you down and show you her room so you'll know where she's at." And as we walked back toward the door, we had to cross the hall and down toward where the living room was. Mom was standing there, and she saw us walk by, and she started screaming for Estella. Yeah, it was a hard thing to do to have to take her there, but it wasn't. But she didn't have to stay there long, because after I had gone home, well, it wasn't long again, maybe 6 weeks, and Walton called us again and said that Mom was pretty low and that didn't think she'd last very long. Well, we went down, and this was on we got down there on Merle's birthday, the 16th of June, 1966. And Mom, they had her in a separate little room by herself so that we as a family could visit her, and Uncle Bill and Aunt Bertha was there. Of course, we were all talking and visiting back and forth. All at once, Mom raised up and she says, "Oh no, not now, Dad." We wondered if it wasn't at that time that Dad had come to greet Mom, usher her into the automobile. And as we went home that night, I remember Merle, and Merle and Willow were there too, by the way, and Merle remarks, says, "This is a fine birthday present to have." Well, we went back to Walt's house and went to bed. Long in the wee hours of the night, why, Walt came, knocked on her door and said that they had called from the nursing home, rest home, that Mom had passed away. We'd already made arrangements for a funeral home to pick her up. So Mom and Dad both are buried in Rose Hills, California, or near Whittier, California, Rose Hill Cemetery. That was 1966 that Mom had died. Mom was 76 years old at the time. Well, along that fall, my neck that I'd been having so much trouble with over the years was giving me a bad time, and I was going to the doctors and trying to get some relief from it. And didn't seem to be anything that they could do to help it. Well, this one day when I went to the doctor, I was working from 4 to 12, the swing shift, so I had the daytime. I went to the doctor this one day, and as I was about to leave, I told the doctor, I says, well, if I thought I could get away with it, I wouldn't go back over there anymore. I'd just retire and check out. He looked at me and he says, well, he says, you're not going back over there anymore. And he walked to the hallway and to the door, and he says, you see that office down there, down the hall? You go in there and give those girls the authorization to send your medical report over to Mare Island. Well, that was late in the fall of '66. We had already sold our home on Florida Street, but bought a mobile home, had it set up. It seemed like we were kind of preparing for, well, wait a minute, we didn't sell it till, we didn't sell that house till after I did retire. I have to think back myself how things was, but anyway, I had enough sick leave accumulated that I grew my full pay until June of 1967. When I went over and finalized my retirement. So I've been retired now for 20 years. 20 years this month. This is 1987. And after I had retired, why, I guess one day there I was kind of moping around and kind of wondering what I was going to do with myself. I was only 59 years old and I wasn't really ready to retire. I still had wanting to do things. But yet I was having so much trouble with my neck, the pain in my neck, that I was moping around this one day, and Stella, she was trying to figure out why I was so glum. Of course she knew of the pain in my neck, but she felt like it was something else. And she came out to where I was at out in the garage, and she says, do you want me to quit my child care business? I bluntly said yes. So that weekend she quit her child care business, and that was the end of that. And that's when we decided to sell the house and get the mobile home. We bought the mobile home over in Sacramento, and then we moved it on a mobile park out in the north side of Vallejo there. Thought it would be close to Eileen and Marty. They lived out there in that north, just off the highway going to Napa. Well, we didn't live in that mobile home very long either. Barbara and Wells were living over in Foster City at the time. Wells had accepted a job at the University of Idaho in Pocatello. So this was, let's see, it was in October 1967. And right at the time, Barbara was pregnant with Ray when they were packing up their things, getting ready to move to Pocatello. And during all that commotion, why, or DeRay, I don't know which one, they decided it was time that DeRay was to be born anyway, and she was born. Well, that meant that Barbara had to stick around a while to recuperate, so she came to our place and stayed for, I think she stayed there about 10 days. And Wells and Doug and Darren, I believe. See, I don't know whether Darren went or not. But anyway, Doug did. They'd all already gone on to Pocatello, and Darren and, let's see, Doug and Debbie went with Wells to Pocatello. And Diana and Darren stayed back with Barbara at our place. When Barbara got ready to go home, we had a camper at that time, and so we loaded up and headed out for Pocatello. We stayed with Barbara in their house where they moved to on Pine Street for several days, trying to get her house straightened up and get things in order so that she could start her housekeeping there. Then we went on down here to Salt Lake, and Shirlene was living up on Parkview Circle and overlooking Mill Creek. And we went to their place, and right away Shirlene says, "You have a mobile home now." She says, "I don't see any reason why you should, other than for Eileen's sake and Marty's down in Vallejo, why you should stay there. Why don't you move your mobile home here?" And she said that she had a place all picked out for us. So she took us down to the Country Club Mobile Park. It was a brand new park, and there were just very sparse trailers in there. There wasn't very many at all. We were almost a charter member, you might say. And we picked out a place to put our mobile home. And we went back to Vallejo again and made arrangements for our trailer to be moved to Salt Lake. That was about the easiest move we ever made. All we had to do was kind of pack things in the mobile home and leave it right in there, and they just hauled the whole works, furniture and all, right inside the mobile home. Of course, I got a trailer, a four-wheel trailer, and put behind the pickup coming back, and I'll hold all the awnings and skirting and things like that was accessories to the mobile home, the porches that I had built. That, by the way, that mobile home is still out here at the Country Club Mobile Home Park. I was thinking of the time that Edna died. That was Stella's sister, Edna Toombs. Edna had been sick for quite a little while, and she was in the hospital in Salt Lake here for a while, and Dorothy came up here from Tempe, and she persuaded Edna to go home with her down to Tempe. Well, Edna wasn't down there very long, so she was right back in the hospital. And the hospital wouldn't take care of her any longer, so they put her in a nursing home. And we decided that we'd go down. Dorothy called us and said that Edna was pretty bad and that we wanted to see her, that we should come. And we drove down there. We got down there late one evening, and it was still early enough that we could have gone to see her, but Dorothy thought, well, knowing her way things was with her, that she's probably already bedded down and didn't want to disturb her, so we didn't go down to see her. Along in the night, they called Dorothy and told her that Edna had passed away. Well, we didn't get to see Edna after all before she passed away. I guess she figured that we were there and that was the main thing. So the next morning we took off for Salt Lake again to get home, because they were going to bring Edna back to Pocatello for the funeral. And we got kind of a late start, and by the time we got up to Page, about 9 miles out of Page, Arizona, it was dark, after dark. We went up over a little hill, and been kind of rolling hills there, and came up over this one, and I said, oh, there's some cows alongside the road. And all at the same time, Estella says, there's one right in front of you. Well, she said, spotted it too late. We hit that cow, and we caved the whole front of her car into him. It killed the cow outright. Maybe it was a good thing it did, because they claimed that the cow, as it came right up on the hood of the car, right up close to the windshield. Said if a cow comes through the windshield, they usually kick their legs and killed all the people that was in the car, so we always considered ourselves lucky. We got home all right. The highway patrol, when they came out and looked the situation over, why, he said these Indians out here let their cows roam. This is Indian territory, and they don't have to be fenced in. There's no control over the cattle. They let them roam over the highway. And he also said that the owner of the cow found out who it was that killed the cow, they could come back at him for payment for the cow. But he says, I'm not going to tell them who it was if they come to me to find out what your name is and where you live. He says, I'm not going to go look them up. They have to come to me before I tell them. But we never did hear anything from it. And as we were going back to, the Highway Patrol had sent a wrecker out to pick up our car. And as we were going back to the Page, where he says, I have a motel all reserved for you. And I guess good thing he had, because I think we got the last one that was in town. Because the clerk at the motel said, you're lucky, says, this town is full of some kind of goings on. I don't know what it was that was happening there. And After about, let's see, after about 1971, 2, we bought a trailer and we started going down to St. George during the winter. And after several trips down there and staying all winter, why, Fontella and Byrne, they decided they would try it. And they got a trailer and they moved down there, and we would do this every winter for several years. Well, I say several, it was probably about 3 or 4 years. And one day we got a letter from Barber and Wells, and they had gone to Hawaii, BYU over in Hawaii. We got a letter from them, and they suggested that we were going to spend that much time down in St. George, we ought to buy a house down there. So we decided that's what we would do. We'd sell the one we had here on Sherman Street and buy one down there. Well, that's what we did. We bought a little 4-bedroom. It only had 1 bath, though. That was a bad thing about it, but it had 4 bedrooms. Nice little house, and it was only 3 years old at the time. And we lived in that for about 5 years. Let's see, was it 5 years? 6 years, 6 years. I don't know. Anyway, when Barber and Wells came back from Hawaii, they moved back to their own same old house, and we came up for Christmas, that first Christmas after they were back, and while they were here, while we were here, they said, well, if we didn't have some people in the apartment that we have on their house is a duplex, and a 2-bedroom apartment on one end of it, and since we didn't have someone in there, we'd persuade you to move up here into that. And we said, oh well, we'll stick it out down there. One thing led to another, and finally we decided we would make the move when the next time the people lease time was up, and Barber and Wells decided they weren't going to renew their lease. We decided that we'd make the move when that time come. So Barber came over and told people, and that when their lease was up, that they wanted the place back again. And Barber had called us or wrote to us, I don't remember which, and told us that the people agreed that they would start looking for a place right away. But we didn't have to wait. March the 20th of 1980, on my sweetheart Estella's birthday, we moved in there. And we've been here ever since. Of course, Estella died. It'll be 4 years this August. In 1983, when she passed away. I want to bear you my testimony. I know that God lives, and that Jesus is the Christ. I know that Ezra Taft Benson is the prophet of the Lord. And as of today. And I know that all the apostles are called of the Lord. And I know that Joseph Smith was an instrument in the Lord's hands, called as a prophet to instrument and bring the gospel into play. We also